So again, welcome. I'm Shannon here with Team Beesley. Prop 19 is what we're talking about today. So just a little housekeeping and a quick agenda here. We're going to go through some introductions, turn it over to Steve to talk about what we know about Prop 19. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the parent to child exclusion portion of Prop 19, and then question and answers at the end. So the presentation is going to be about 20 minutes, and then stick around. We've fielded a lot of questions from you guys that Steve's going to really kind of dig into. And if you have more questions throughout, feel free to enter them into either the Q&A box at the bottom or down into the chat box, and we will bring those questions up to Steve at the end. We are recording this, so if you have to jump off or if you have friends you want to send it to, we will have a link here in the next day or so. So on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Ben.
So I'm going to start with a little tax joke. So I'd like to tell you some tax jokes, but I doubt you'd depreciate it. It's not very funny, but it's the only one I got. So per Wikipedia, I get all my information from Wikipedia. Proposition 19, also referred to as Assembly Constitutional Amendment number 11, is a complex, is an underscored, California ballot proposition that appeared on the ballot this last November. As passed, the proposition increases the property tax burden on owners of inherited property in favor of providing expanded property tax benefits to homeowners ages 55 years and older, disabled homeowners, and victims of wildfires and natural disasters. To help us understand Prop 19 and how it may affect us, we're extremely fortunate to have Steve Vagnini. Stephen, since 2002, has been the Monterey County Assessor. His accomplishments are numerous, including, this is a fun one, allowing residents to now access public records dating back to 1832. Developing electronic recording, increased the quality of county appraisals, all the while, and I can attest to this, being approachable for any question, concern, or misunderstanding. In addition to that job, he's spent over 30 years of community service, serving on numerous committees, heading department committees. It's a whole litany of lists. Know that we're a better community because of Steve. He's also, if you've ever heard or been to the West End, Sand City's music festival, in 2010, he stepped in as the role of the event coordinator, helped to turn the festival into one of the most popular in all of Monterey County. And the one thing that he's probably most proud of is the co-founder and today serves as president of the Monterey County Chapter of Guitars Not Guns, a nonprofit that provides free guitar lessons and guitars to youth throughout Monterey County. Today, Guitars Not Guns Monterey County chapter has grown into the largest in the United States, donating over 1,100 guitars and countless hours of lessons to kids in the classroom settings with qualified teachers. I know he'd rather talk about that, but today we get to have him talk more about Prop 19 and how it impacts us. So I'm going to turn it initially over to Steve, and then we'll come over from some questions later. Steve, welcome.
Well, thank you, Ben. Thank you for those comments. And it's actually 2,300 guitars, if you can believe that.
Oh my God.
In 10 years. So it is a good thing. And like everything, it's been a challenge to keep it going on during COVID. But thank you for inviting me here to talk to you today about my favorite subject this last year, Proposition 19. You know, Proposition 19 is not so bad when you compare it to COVID-19, right?
Yeah, it's better 19.
But, you know, I will just say, if you get anything out of this discussion today from me is, if you have any questions, call our office. Like Ben said, we're very accessible. You can call me, my assistant, Marina Camacho, who knows more about this than everybody, and Myra Campos, Emma Reyes. I've got a great staff in both the recorder and the assessor's office that I owe everything to. And also, there's a great deal of information on the State Board of Equalization website. So if you Google State Board of Equalization, go to their website, then hit the property taxes. There's a whole section on Prop 19. It has questions galore, answers those questions. Great source of information. So what is Proposition 19? This was, as you mentioned earlier on, it was ACA 11, which was actually the the measure that the voters passed in November. And really, when I think of Proposition 19, this was the realtors. It was the realtors. This is the bill that they wanted to get through for some time, because we had this great proposition known as 60, which allowed people to transfer their property as they got older. When they were 55 years or older, they could transfer their base year value, and the low base year value is the thing that's so crucial to everybody, is that low base year value. And when you're 55 or older, the theory was you could downsize and buy a house equal or less value and transfer that base year value to your new purchase. When I say equal or less value, you could get a 5% bump or for the first year. So if you sold your house for $1 million, you could buy a house for $1,050,000 and transfer your base year value. And you could only do it within your county. Then they passed Proposition 90 that allowed you to do it from one county to the other, but only if the Board of Supervisors allowed that. Monterey County had that for a short while, but then they decided to sunset it because they felt like they were losing too much revenue. So the realtors felt that by allowing this to go from county to county, it would increase sales activity. There were all sorts of benefits. And the only problem was it was still going to lose revenue, so they couldn't get support from the school districts and the fire districts. And when it came up for election 2 years ago, it went down. It was defeated. So when they came together with the current Proposition 19, they add a second component, which I'll refer to as the intergenerational transfer portion, that a lot of people, when they voted for Prop 19, were unaware of the consequences. So the bill passed in November, and it's part of ACA 11, which means it's in the Constitution, different sections that talk about all the sections. So what do we know about Prop 19? I'll start with that. So Prop 19, there's two parts of it. The one part that the realtors really wanted to see, and instead of now having to buy a home of equal or less value, you can buy a house that's more expensive. You can buy it, Prop 60, you could only do it once, unless you did it a second time. If you could demonstrate that you were permanently and severely disabled, then you could do it a second time. But you could only use that Prop 60 one time. And as I said, it had to be equal or less value. Now you can do it more than once. You can do it up to 3 times. You can buy a house that's more expensive. I'm going to go over certain things. And I might add that the thing that's been real frustrating for me and all the assessors throughout California is when the bill was written, ACA 11, there was so much ambiguity in the bill that we're all just scratching our heads trying to figure out, well, what do we do? What do we do with this? What do you do with that? There's so much confusion. And toward that end, we've been working for the last few months trying to pass what we refer to as a cleanup bill to clarify a lot of the questions that we have. So once again, what do we know? So one of the dates has to, of the events when you buy or sell a house, has to occur after April 1st. It has to occur after April 1st. Even though the bill was passed in November, if you sold in November or December and bought in January, it doesn't do you any good. One of the legs of the transaction has to occur after April 1st. You can now buy and sell anywhere in the state of California. There's no restrictions as to, you have to do it within the county. You can, as I said, you can transfer it up to 3 times now. And there's some debate whether or not that means each spouse. So if you're married, we think you can do it up to 6 times. Each spouse has 3 times to transfer. We're writing clarification language on there. So another big component and another good reason for passing this bill was, as you know, we've had a lot of fires throughout the state of California. And for example, people in Sonoma, we had a question about that the other day. Ben did in his office. Somebody's had a house burned down in Sonoma, and it was so expensive to build in Sonoma. The cost of construction was so expensive, they couldn't afford to stay at their existing home. So they had to move out of county and buy a house somewhere else where they could afford. Under the old law, that was not allowable to transfer the base year value. So you have your house burned down, and then to make things worse, you couldn't transfer your base year value. Now you can, victims of wildfire or natural disasters can do that. They can go sell in Sonoma and buy in Monterey County. And the big thing is you can now buy up or purchase a replacement property of greater value than the original property. Now, the way that works, and there's a slide that we will see real soon. The way that works is you don't transfer, if you sell your house for $1 million and you buy a house for $2 million, you're not going to have the same value transferred to that $1 million property. So if you will, I think you've got that slide showed up right now. There's an example, not the one before that.
Previous one, Melissa.
Before that.
Back up, there you go.
There you go, right there. So this is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. If the replacement property is greater value, the difference between the replacement property value and the original property value is added to the claimant's base year value. So if you have a house that sold for $1 million, in the old Prop 60, you can only buy a house for $1.05 million to transfer the base year value. So if your base year value, your assessed valuation is $100,000, and I'll tell you what, you would be amazed if you looked at the property tax rolls to see how many people have extremely low base year values, especially in areas like the Monterey Peninsula, where people have lived for generations, and then when they pass away, they transfer it to their children. So now that's, you sell your house for $1 million and you buy a house for $1.5 million. So now you can do that. Now you can buy a house that's more expensive, but as you see, the difference between the $1.5 million and what you sold it for, the $1 million, is $500,000. So you take the $100,000 base year value, add it to the incremental value, the $500,000, and your new base year value is $600,000. So you're paying taxes on you're paying $6,000 a year rather than $15,000 a year. So you're saving $9,000. So that's huge. That's going to be a great incentive for people to now sell their homes. And I can't tell you how many times when I was dealing with Prop 60s myself at one point, the person that did it was out of the office, and people just were unaware of Prop 60, and they realized that they could transfer their base year value. Okay, now I can sell. And the same thing is going to happen. You're going to see people that want to move to Monterey County because they can do that. So that's the great thing. That's what the realtors wanted to have happen, and that's what they were so excited about. Now, as I said early on, because the loss of revenue in the school districts and the fire districts especially, the school districts are the big recipients of property taxes in the state of California. And as a result of Proposition 13, they've always been impacted greatly. So school districts like Carmel and Pacific Grove that directly get their revenue from assessed valuation were very much opposed to this. So to get them on board, they added, which is the second component of the Prop 19, which is referred to as the intergenerational transfer. And what that is before Prop 19, it was known as Prop 58. And what Prop 58 did would allow you to transfer your principal residence, a parent to child transfer. You could transfer your principal residence didn't matter how much the house was worth, you would be able to transfer that residence and none of it would get reassessed. No reassessment whatsoever. No requirements. You could just transfer the property to your children or your grandchildren. If your children had been deceased, the parents of the grandchildren have to all be deceased in order to do that. But you could transfer your principal residence to your children without any reassessment. And you would get to transfer up to $1 million of other property. So for example, if a family owned a principal residence and then they also owned 10 other properties in the county or even in the state with assessed valuations, not the market valuations, if they had owned them for many, many, many years and they had low assessed valuations and all those properties were assessed for lower than $100,000, they could transfer all 10 of those properties and they would not get reassessed as well. So the new law changes that dramatically. And that new law went into effect February 16th. And let me tell you, if you came to the recorder's office the week of February 16th, you would see lines of people waiting to record documents. The lawyers, the trust lawyers were calling me all the time. They were working night and day because the people that did know about this were doing everything they could, being creative to transfer the property to their children to avoid these reassessments. Granted, there's a lot of people that don't know about this that will be impacted later on. So once again, what do we know about this part of the exclusion? Parent to child and grandparent exclusion only applies to the family home, to the principal residence, or the family farm. They were able to add that in to get the Farm Bureau on board with this legislation. Otherwise, the farmers would have opposed it because their taxes would have gone through the roof. And here's another caveat that's really a sticker, and people do not like this as well. The person that inherits the house is going to be required to live in the house. They're going to be required to live in the house in order to get that base share value. Only the first $1 million of the property is going to be exempt for the property taxes too. And how that works is, and it's not as simple as the transfer that we talked about earlier on, but if the full cash of value before the transfer, for example, if the market value is $1,750,000 and they're paying taxes on $950,000. So if the property is now 1,950,000 is greater than the full cash value, then the 950,000 is enrolled. So if it's greater than the assessed valuation plus the $1 million is greater than the full cash value, you're going to get the 950,000 will be enrolled. The problem is when it's less than the full cash value, and that's the other example where the full cash value is $3 million and the factored base share value is 950,000. You add the $1 million and all of a sudden that's less than the full cash value. It's $1,950,000. So you're going to be paying taxes on $2 million. So that's huge. It's going to impact a lot of people that were unaware of that, did not do the transfer before February 16th. So that's going to impact a lot of people. And if you own property that you want to transfer to your children, it's not good news. However, you're going to see a lot more homes that are going to increase your inventory because as people find out that people inherit homes and they're not going to be able to live in the house. And keep in mind that those examples I gave you, it's going to be a requirement for the transferee, the person who inherits that house, to live in the house as well. So a lot of people simply are not going to be able to afford living in the property. So there's so many questions that we're receiving all the time. There's so many different things that can happen. So I'll stop right here, give Ben the opportunity to present some of the questions that were posed beforehand, and I'll answer those basic questions. Then hopefully there'll be some other questions as well.
First of all, thank you, Steve. This literally could be a 6-hour seminar, and I don't think any of us wanted to spend that much time, but this is a very, very quick sketch. We asked many of you to come up with your questions so we could make sure we met your needs. So we're going to address some of those right now. Shannon?
So the first one that came in is, can part of the transaction for base year transfer take place before April 1st of this year?
Yes, yeah. As long as one leg of the transaction happens after April 1st, it's okay for the other transaction, with the caveat that the events have to happen within 2 years of each other. So you couldn't have sold the house. Let's say if you bought the house April 1st, 2021, you couldn't have bought the house or sold your principal residence back in 2018. It would have happened to sold the house before or after April 1st of 2019. And it works both ways. You can, buy a house, sell a house, you can sell a house, then buy a house. As long as it happens within 2 years of each other, and as long as one of the events happens after April 1st, 2021.
Perfect. Melissa, what's the next one? Steve, can this be used for new construction? And what if the home isn't fully built yet?
Okay, that's a good question. Yes, it can be used for new construction. And I had a very well-known attorney that called me with that very own question because he's building a house. But you could have the lot for a long time. And as long as the house is built within 2 years of the sale of the principal residence. And keep in mind too, this still has to be the principal residence too. It can't be for a rental property. It has to be your principal residence. But the answer to the question, yes, it can be used for a house that's not fully built. And you can also build the house, complete it, then you have 2 years to sell the house, your principal residence.
So a little
Julie,
follow-up to that.
Yeah.
Julie just asked, the house completed within 2 years or house started within 2 years?
Completed within 2 years. And it's really strict. When we had Proposition 60, and the same principles applied, except for it was much more restrictive. It had to be equal or less value. It had to be within the county. We had a taxpayer that missed it by a week or two, and they did not qualify. And it was really unfortunate. They had circumstances beyond their control so it's really important, the planning that goes into that. It has to be completed. And what signifies completion of construction? Usually it's the way we interpret it is when you have the certificate of occupancy, when you're allowed to move into the house. So this is crucial. If you're doing this, you have to plan, and you have to give yourself plenty of time and leeway, because as you know, there's always delays in construction.
So along those lines, and I think I know the answer, if I sell my property whenever, can I purchase a lot and build a home as long as it's within 2 years? Will I qualify?
Yes. Yep. As long as it's within 2 years.
Okay.
That's the key, and can't stress it enough. The house has to be completed within that period of time.
Perfect.
It's just like filing an income taxes. If you don't file it on April 15th, you get penalized. There's no exceptions.
Yep.
So unfortunate, and I wish I bend, but I can't. There's certain things that sometimes they allow me to bend and they give the assessor leeway, but in this case, we have no leeway.
All right. If there are multiple children, how does that relate to the inheritance side?
Okay. As long as one child, only one child has to live in the house. As long as one child has to live in the house, it's okay. But for example, and this was part of Prop 58, and it still pertains, if 3 children inherit the house and one of them decides to live there, but the other 2 own the house, uh, as long as the other 2 children are okay with that arrangement, then it's not going to be reassessed. However, when the child that's living in the house decides to buy out the other 2 children, then the 2/3 of the property will get reassessed. So that's a principle that was in place for Prop 58 that will still apply. So, but not all 3 children have to live in the house. Only one child has to live in the house.
So how do you qualify primary residence, and how long do I need to have lived there to qualify?
When you move in, that's all you got to do. You move into the house, you qualify, and you demonstrate that by any way you can. Okay, this is now my principal residence, and you don't have to live. The minute you move into the house and declare that as your principal residence, and get a utility bill in your name, or you can demonstrate you get your driver's license with that address. Not that those things are requirements, but but once you move into that house, it's not like next year you move out and you still retain, or next month for that matter, you still retain. And this has been an interesting topic of discussion amongst the assessors, depending upon what county, what assessor, how are we going to make sure that an individual, once they declare a child inherits the house, they make that their principal residence. How are we going to be able to demonstrate that they're there the next year? Some assessors will be sending out affidavits to be sworn to by the individual. Some people just don't want to be the police. So, but to answer your question, once they move in there, they become the principal residence. And now there's going to be exceptions to that too. If somebody is in the military and gets called away for a year or so, there'll be exceptions to that we'll recognize. And those are some of the questions and nuances of the law that we're currently working on.
Okay.
All right. Next question, Melissa. What forms do I need to fill out to qualify? And does my real estate agent need to do this for me?
No, the real estate does not have to do that. The real estate agent, all they need to do is, be aware of the law and be able to answer the questions, the basic questions, and direct them to our offices if they have any additional questions. But we have the forms on our website. We have the forms available at our office. You call our office, and we're glad to help people, walk them through the process. It's really a simple process. It's a really simple form. All we do is we need to validate that either one of the 2 spouses are over 55 years or older. You have to list the property you sold, the date you sold it, and what you sold it for, date of the new property, same information, what you sold it for, when you purchased it, sign it, and that's it. We take care of the rest. It's such a simple process. It's amazing simple, and the realtors do not have to do anything.
I've already done a Prop 60 or a Prop 90. Can I still utilize Prop 19?
Absolutely. You can utilize it 3 more times. And if you're disabled, another time, so yeah, you can. Yeah, it runs concurrent with the previous law. It allows you to benefit for the another 3 transfers. So it's really, I refer to it as Prop 60 on steroids. It gives you a tremendous opportunity to transfer your base year value from not within your county you live, from county to county, all within the state. Allows you to buy up, with retaining not all of the base year value, but a good portion of the base year value. So it should be a tremendous boon to the real estate industry. I would imagine, a lot of people will start taking advantage of it, and it'll be really interesting to see how that goes.
I think we've got a few more questions. So what sort of impact is Proposition 19 expected to have on property tax revenue for Monterey County? Is it expected to stay the same, go up, or down?
Well, we're going to lose revenue on the base year transfers. But when you say lose revenue, we're gonna in some ways, and I worked with the MCAR when they were trying to get Prop 90 brought back to Monterey County, which would have allowed inter-county transfers. And they made good arguments. You get people in their senior years moving to the area, and they contribute to the neighborhoods. But on the other hand, they're going to be bringing their lower base year values. So, it's really hard to gauge. I think there will be a loss of potential revenue as a result of that, and possibly a loss of revenue, because somebody could be living in a $5 million home where the taxes are $50,000 a year, and somebody from Los Gatos may buy that $5 million home and sell their home for $5 million in Los Gatos that they've owned forever, and they're paying very, very low taxes. So now they sell that house in Los Gatos, buy the house in Monterey, so that house that was getting $50,000 will now be getting maybe $5,000. So there's a potential for a loss in revenue. And so the flip side of that is the potential gain for revenue, when I talked about as the exclusions on the intergenerational transfers will be restricted. So as you can imagine, when people pass away and transfer their homes to their children, how many people are going to be able to, well, first of all, how many people are going to live in that house that they inherit from their parents, if they live in the East Coast? And I don't know if it's really funny if you look at the bill when it was first passed, that the reason for this is that they said there was all sorts of East Coast people moving to California to take advantage of these low base year values. I thought that was funny that they were coming from the East Coast. But when you think about it, there are people coming from all around the country that inherit homes in California. I mean, we're such a mobile society today. And now, unless they move to California, they're not going to be able to transfer, they're not going to be able to keep the properties because the tax is going to go crazy high. And even if they do live in the property, only the first $1 million, as we showed in the example. So you buy a house or you inherit a house in in Carmel that's worth $5 million, your taxes could even be high then, not to mention all the others. So there's a great deal of potential for gaining a lot of revenue. And that's another thing we're scrambling, trying to figure out, how do we keep track of all this? Because the state's going to require us to keep track of all the gain of revenue, because it's going to be distributed between the fire districts and the school districts. So guess who gets to do that? My office and the auditor's office has to keep track of all the loss and the gain in revenue. So I'll have a great answer for you in a couple of years. I'll be able to tell you we're not looking forward to that. Yeah, it'll be interesting. But to answer your question, we don't know. Imagine we'll lose some money on the base year transfers, but we'll probably more than offset that with the gain of revenue by the loss of the restriction of the intergenerational transfers. I was talking to a good friend of mine, a trust attorney, the other day, and one of his clients owns a lot of rental property in Monterey County. And he said, "Do you want to do something?" He goes, "No, I'm going to just pass the increase in taxes on to my tenants." So, I mean, that's sad because that's the way some property owners look at it. And it's going to just put more of a squeeze on the people that can least afford to live in this area, whether as tenants of commercial property or rental apartments. And it's the way some of the property owners look at it. They're just going to pass those costs on to their. So in the end, it'll probably be some additional revenue for the county. That's the hope behind the bill.
So I think what we're going to do is we're going to stop sharing the screen for a minute. We've had some questions that have come in while we've been talking, and a couple that were emailed in as well. So the first one I'm going to ask, this comes from Russ, is what is the procedure to request a reassessment of property tax down to a parent's rate on a property inherited by children as a result of death of the parent?
Okay. Well, it's not going to go down. It won't be going down. If anything, you'll be retaining that low base year value. It's not going to go any further down than it already is. However, what do you do in order to retain that low base year value? The only thing you have to do is whenever somebody transfers property, you record a deed in the recorder's office. When you record the deed, you fill out a preliminary change of ownership form, and you fill that out, letting us know what has occurred. Our office, our transfer department, will then interpret that data and give you a call. Sometimes if it's in a trust, they'll require we'll ask to look at the trust so we'll understand things further. But the only thing you have to do is fill out that form and answer any questions that we may have in our office. We'll work with you to interpret the transfer. When anybody dies, when they pass away, we send out what we refer to as a DORPO, a death of real property owner. And I see someone form names. That would be Prop 58 form, but now it'll be a Prop 19 form. I think it's intergenerational transfer form is what it will be referred to. So you just fill out the forms, but the first thing you do is when you record a deed, make sure you fill out that PCOR as detailed, answer all the questions, and somebody from our office will either mail you a letter or probably mail you a letter requesting additional information.
Couple others that have come in. One says, does Prop 19 replace Prop 60 and Prop 90?
Yes, it does completely. Yeah. But keep in mind, and it replaces Prop 58, which was the intergenerational. But this is another question that's come up a lot. The ones that had already received the benefits of Prop 58 are grandfathered in. So you don't lose that base year value if you inherited a property before February 16th. Okay. That was the cutoff date there.
And then Bob just asked, can you speak to what happens when children inherit a property and go to sell it immediately? Does Prop 19 still allow for a stepped up basis to avoid capital gains tax for the children?
That would be an entirely different question. That would be for the federal government, the state and federal tax laws, the step up. Although I don't think anything will change. The existing law will be the same that's in place, although beware, I've heard that they're talking about there's potential for that law changing as well. But as far as Prop 19, that did not change anything at all.
Steve,
Okay.
does it matter at all if it's in a trust?
I'm sorry, what?
Does it matter at all if the property is in a trust with?
It does, but we have to look at the trust to interpret the trust. Once again, it's parent to child. That's when it's in a trust. Typically, it doesn't matter, but if it's in a trust, we'll sometimes request to look at that trust in order to make determinations further.
And then another question, let's see what this one says. You've mentioned multiple times that many people did not realize they were voting on the repeal of most of Prop 58 intergenerational transfer law. Do you have a sense that if people had known about the second component, that it would have been voted differently?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I think people were blindsided by, like I say, I was, the weekly endorsed it, and they had no idea what they were endorsing. The trust attorneys that I were talking to before had no idea what it was going to do unless they really, really paid attention. A lot of them didn't pay attention. So I think if people knew what they know now, it would have been defeated for sure. And, you know, like I say, there's going to be all sorts of attempts to reverse this law, whether through court or subsequent legislation or referendums. People are unhappy. And I still think a lot of people are unaware of the effects. And they won't be until they transfer the property. Certainly people that live outside of California, when they inherit the house, they're going to be for a big surprise. They may have not been familiar with our property tax laws in the first place, but it's amazing how many people, when they found out about it, started calling their attorneys and their accountants, and it got really busy. Yeah, somebody just popped up on the chat saying if it's a revocable trust, it doesn't matter. And that's true. It's a revocable trust. It wouldn't impact anything. But sometimes we need to take a look at the trust to understand things better. No, it's very complicated. You know, we just talked about it briefly, but there's so many other questions that people may have. And like I say, the State Board of Equalization has a lot of those questions on their website that people have asked, and they do their best to answer them. Some we just simply don't know the answer to those questions yet because we have to interpret it now. But as you have questions moving forward, please call our office. And like Ben said at the get-go, we're very accessible. Even though 70% of the staff is working remotely, you call it up, you know, you'll get through just as easily as you did before. And we're there to answer all your questions. And, you know, there's going to be a lot of questions moving forward for sure. And we'll figure it out. And like everything, it's probably the biggest change in property tax laws since Proposition 13 passed. And thank goodness there was another initiative that was on the ballot, which was the split roll. And had that passed, that would have required us to reassess commercial properties the way we did with before Prop 13 on an annual basis. But that was just narrowly defeated. That almost passed as well. And that would have been even crazier than Prop 19.
Steve, there's a question, it's a form BOE 58AH, claim for reassessment exclusion for transfer between parent and child form. Is that still used?
No, that form will become obsolete because it's now replaced by and I should know the form. I believe the new forms are on our website already. It's the Intergenerational Transfer form, and I don't know if it says Prop 19 on it, but those forms are now available, and I believe they're on our website already.
And I think there's just one.
Call our office and we'll get you one.
I think there's one more, and I think you touched on it, but just to make sure we get all the questions answered, it says, if a couple has already enacted Prop 60 and rolled over their property tax base, is there any way to roll the initial tax base over one more time?
Yes. Yeah, you can do it 3 more times now. You know, if you used it under Prop 60, you can now use Prop 19 3 times to continue rolling that base share value over.
But it has to be within the last 2 years.
Yeah, it has to be within 2 years. And I think when it's within 2 years, you have to do it. You have to file with our office within 3 years. But don't wait 3 years to do it. And it's once the second event occurs, that's when the taxes, the new tax or the old tax goes into effect.
Kurt asked a quick question. I think you addressed it. You said there's no requirement of time for child inheriting a house to live there, just declare it as your primary residence. Then what is to stop you from moving in for 3 months, then moving out and renting it? I think that's a county per county.
No, I'm sorry if I was confusing on that. The child has to stay in the house.
I think he's asking though, what if the child moves in for 3 months and then moves out to rent it? Is that
Who's enforcing that?
Who's enforcing that?
Then it gets reassessed.
And it's each county is depending on how they're going to determine if the primary residence, if the person's there, right? Are they going to send somebody there, or are they going to?
If you move in for 6 months and you move out, once you move out, then it's going to get reassessed.
Yeah.
I mean, that's you can imagine that's going to be, I mean, how often does that happen that you've seen homes where parents, I'm sure there's cases where, you know, a child lives in the house, but probably more not than it does happen. I'm just guessing. Certainly people from outside of the area. And remember, the taxes could go up significantly and they won't be able to afford the taxes as well. Even though they're living in the house, they only benefiting from the first $1 million. So if it's Carmel or Pacific Grove or even certain areas in Monterey, Carmel Valley, the Highlands, where all over the place where homes are worth, you know, several $1 million, will, even though they're living there, will they be able to afford the property taxes? Right. So these are individual cases. They're going to come up, you know, and they're going to say, well, what are my taxes going to be like if I even do live in the house? And that's where call our office and we'll do the calculations for you and tell you what they're going to be.
Well, Steve, I know we've already received a lot of compliments for the information, the timeliness, and I'm, in addition to you being available, if there are changes or addendums, would you be available for another call down the road? Absolutely. You know how to reach me. And I appreciate that. I so appreciate that. Yeah. Cool. Well, we're going to be sending out a survey to everybody. Hopefully you'll spend just a minute to respond to that. If you ever want to know what the value of your property is, give us a call. We'll go out and take care of that free of charge. Just let us know.
And again, this was recorded, so in another day, we'll have the link out. We'll have it on our YouTube channel. We can share it out along with the survey. But feel free to reach out to any of us for questions, and thanks for joining us tonight. And a huge thank you to the faceless Melissa Everett, who's making all this happen behind the scenes. We appreciate you, Melissa. And Steve, again, thank you so very much on behalf of all of us. Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Property. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a great night, everyone. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.